The vast galactic hall shimmered with the glow of alien technology, the size of small moons gleaming above as Rael Thorne stood tall at the entrance, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on his shoulders, his boots clicking softly against the marble floor of the throne room. Rael felt the full force of the Scythar's gaze upon him, each one of their eyes burning with curiosity or disdain. It was hard to tell which one they felt more strongly today. Rael was human, and that was something they had all but dismissed as unworthy of note in a galaxy where species with centuries of power and technology ruled humanity, was still a young force barely a flicker against the stars. Yet here he stood, an ambassador to the mightiest empire in the known universe. His mission simple: secure a treaty or face annihilation. The fate of Earth rested on his shoulders. He looked up toward the throne where Emperor Aloreth sat, his towering form a silhouette against the strange cosmic energy field that swirled behind him, an alien being whose every movement exuded power and control. His cold blue eyes narrowed as they scanned Rael from head to toe, as if searching for any sign of weakness. His mouth curled into a slight sneer at the sight of the human standing defiantly before him. Aloreth had expected someone smaller, less sure of themselves, a weaker human, perhaps a creature whose mind could be easily bent and broken. But Rael was different. His confidence bled through every action. He took the slight cock of his head, the way his eyes never left the Emperor's, not in defiance, but with the calm resolve of one who had nothing to fear. Human, the Emperor's voice was like a ripple across water, cold and commanding. You have come to my throne room to negotiate terms, as if you are an equal to the Scythar. But you are no such thing. You are nothing more than a fleeting moment in the history of the galaxy, a passing distraction. Rael did not flinch nor lower his gaze. Your arrogance blinds you, Aloreth, he replied, his voice steady and calm. You mistake humanity's will to survive for weakness. We do not bend or break under pressure. We rise and fight for what we believe in, and we fought for everything we've gained. The room was silent as the Emperor's eyes flickered with something akin to surprise, a rare emotion for someone who had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Yet Rael did not allow himself to feel satisfaction, not yet. Survival, Aloreth muttered with a low laugh. Survival alone does not make a species strong. Maybe not, Rael countered, but survival in the face of impossible odds, that's what makes us strong. That's what makes us different from every other species. That's why we're here today, because no matter how powerful you think you are, you've never met the human spirit. The Emperor's gaze darkened, and the murmurs in the crowd of Scythar nobles grew louder at Rael's boldness. He had struck a nerve, but Aloreth did not show it. He leaned back in his throne, with a slow, deliberate motion, his eyes never leaving Rael's face. You may have fought for your survival on your world, human, but here in my empire you will bend or be crushed, he said coldly. Rael met his stare unwavering, not a flicker of fear in his eyes. We'll see about that, he said. And in that moment, Rael knew the negotiation was no longer about words. It was about something deeper, something far more important, and he was ready for whatever came next. The tension in the room thickened as Rael stood unwavering before Emperor Aloreth, the air heavy with the unspoken weight of the moment. Aloreth leaned forward slightly, his piercing eyes narrowing as he observed the human before him, a species so young, so seemingly insignificant, yet here it was challenging the very heart of his empire. You speak with much bravado, human. Aloreth's voice was low, his words dripping with contempt. But I have seen countless species come and go. They all speak of survival. They all speak of strength. But in the end they are crushed beneath the weight of their own arrogance. Your people will be no different. Rael stood his ground, his expression calm yet determined. You're wrong, he said, his voice clear and unwavering. You don't understand what it means to be human. You've never faced what we have. The Emperor's gaze flickered with a touch of curiosity, though he tried to hide it. Tell me then, human, he said, leaning forward slightly. What makes you so special? What gives you the right to stand before me and lecture me on strength? Rael took a deep breath, not flinching under the Emperor's scrutiny. We don't need centuries of advanced technology. To win battles, we don't need superior strength to survive. What we have is something you can't replicate or measure. He paused, letting the silence settle between them. We have resolve, we have a will to fight that never breaks, no matter how impossible the odds." The Scythar nobles around them murmured in disdain at Rael's words. They had never heard such defiance from a lesser species, let alone a human one. Elorath scoffed and motioned to one of his subordinates, who stepped forward holding a holoprojector. With a few commands, the screen flickered to life, revealing a map of Earth and its surrounding territories. "I've studied your world, human," Elorath continued. "Your species has barely mastered the basics of space travel, and you are fragile in the face of true power. How long do you think your fragile existence can last before something much stronger than you decides to eliminate you?" Rael's eyes locked onto the image of Earth, and he smiled slightly despite the odds stacked against him. "You underestimate us," he said quietly. "Earth has always been surrounded by threats, yet we survive, we adapt, and we learn from our mistakes." "Enough of this banter," Elorath interjected with a sharp motion, dismissing the holoprojector. "Your words are meaningless without action, and I am done wasting time on a species that will never be able to stand against the might of the Tythar Empire." The Emperor's eyes glowed with an unsettling coldness. "I'll give you one chance, human," he said slowly. "You will face the might of the arena and prove yourself worthy of speaking to me, or you will die in the sands, just like the countless others who thought they could challenge us." Rael knew what was coming, and yet he felt no fear. He had fought in countless battles on Earth against forces that were far beyond anything the Scythar could throw at him. The arena would be just another challenge, another test of his humanity's will to survive. "I'll accept your challenge," Rael said without hesitation, his voice echoing through the room as the murmurs of the Scythar court grew louder. Elorath leaned back in his throne, satisfied with his victory. "Very well, human, prepare to meet your end." As Rael was escorted away toward the arena, his mind was focused not on the fight itself, but on the message he was sending. Humanity was no longer a species to be ignored, no longer a species to be dismissed. They had the power to change the course of the galaxy, and today was just the beginning. Rael was led through the cold, metallic corridors of the Tythar capital, his footsteps echoing with every step. As he was guided toward the arena, the air around him thick with the anticipation of what was to come. He had faced worse before. He had fought in wars against enemies far more brutal than these Scythar, yet the stakes now were different. This was no ordinary battle. It was a spectacle for the galaxy to watch, a test of humanity's very worth before the eyes of an empire that had never known fear. The guards around him were silent, their glowing eyes locked onto him with barely concealed contempt. Rael knew they expected him to break before he even stepped into the arena, to cower before the terror that awaited him. But they didn't know him. They didn't know what humans were capable of when cornered. He entered the massive arena through an archway that led into a vast coliseum, a place where gladiators and creatures of all kinds fought for their lives under the bloodthirsty gaze of the Scythar nobility. The arena was enormous, stretching out in every direction with towering walls of glass that allowed the spectators to watch from every angle. Rael's eyes scanned the place, taking in the sheer size of it, although he didn't flinch under its intimidating presence. As he stepped forward into the center of the arena, the ground beneath his boots felt like the pulse of a living thing. He could hear the crowd growing louder, their anticipation almost palpable. But Rael was unshaken. He had been in the heart of combat before, had stared down the darkest corners of war, where the enemy didn't just want to kill you, they wanted to wipe your people from existence. This was a challenge to be overcome, not feared. The arena doors on the far side opened with a deafening roar, and out came the first beast, a towering monstrosity covered in thick scales that seemed to shimmer in the light of the arena. Its eyes glowed with a feral hunger as it lumbered toward Rael. Its mouth opened with a hiss, revealing rows of jagged teeth. The crowd screamed in excitement as the beast charged towards him, but Rael didn't move an inch. He stood his ground, waiting for the right moment. The creature roared as it neared him, swinging its massive claws. Rael's instincts kicked in. He ducked just as the claws slashed through the air above his head, and he pivoted on his heel, using the momentum to land a hard kick to the beast's side. The Tythar spectators gasped at the human speed and agility. Rael was no mere target. He was a fighter. His move was calculated, his body fluid like water as he dodged the creature's next strike and rolled to the side, positioning himself with precision. He grabbed one of the arena's scattered weapons, a jagged metal spear, and used it to pierce the beast's underbelly with a swift strike. The creature let out a deafening roar of pain, but Rail didn't stop. He followed up with another strike, piercing deeper into its flesh, until the beast collapsed with a final thrashing roar. The arena fell silent for a moment before erupting in applause, but Rail didn't wait for their approval. He was already looking for the next challenge. His mind was focused, sharp as ever. His heart raced, but it wasn't fear, it was adrenaline. And with every beat of it, he felt something stir inside him, a fire, a drive to prove that humans were more than what the galaxy thought they were. Another roar filled the arena as the next beast emerged. Rail was ready. His body was already in motion, his will stronger than ever. He wasn't here to survive for survival's sake. He was here to show the galaxy that humanity would never bow, and that even in the face of death, they would rise. Rail stood in the center of the arena, his chest heaving as the crowd's roars echoed around him. The first beast lay crumpled at his feet, its massive form still and lifeless. He wiped the sweat from his brow, not bothering to glance at the blood that stained his hands. His focus never wavered. The Exathar may have been impressed, but this was far from over. The next challenge had already emerged from the far gates, a massive shape that made the first beast seem like an appetizer. The new creature was a towering nightmare, its limbs like tree trunks, its eyes glowing with an eerie blue light. Its hide was like iron, and its teeth were long, sharp daggers, dripping with venom. The arena buzzed with anticipation as the creature's deep growl reverberated through the ground. Rail's eyes narrowed, calculating. He could hear the crowd murmuring, their disbelief palpable at how effortlessly he had dispatched the first monster. But they had no idea what was coming now, and neither did he. The beast lumbered forward, its massive claws leaving deep marks in the dirt with every step. It was faster than Rail expected, and it let out a bone-rattling roar as it charged, its massive fists coming down with deadly force. The crowd roared as one, their excitement growing as the beast closed the distance. Rail didn't hesitate. His legs tensed, and he leaped to the side, narrowly dodging the first strike. The ground cracked where the beast's claws collided, sending a shockwave through the arena. Rail hit the ground hard, rolling to his feet in a fluid motion. His pulse raced, his muscles already aching from the first fight. But he couldn't afford to slow down. He needed to win. Not just for him, not just for Earth, but for every species who had ever been dismissed as weak. He needed to prove humanity's strength. The beast howled again, charging once more, and this time, Rail was ready. As the creature swung a massive fist toward him, Rail dodged, ducking under the blow and driving his shoulder into the beast's massive chest. The impact rattled him, but the creature barely flinched. Rail's eyes darted around the arena, searching for anything that could give him an advantage. He spotted a jagged stone pillar off to his left, its sharp edge jutting out of the ground like a weapon. The beast growled, its claws now aimed directly at Rail, and it charged again. Rail didn't waste time thinking. He dashed toward the stone pillar, using the momentum of the beast's charge to his advantage. With one swift move, Rail grabbed the stone, his fingers finding purchase as he swung the sharp end toward the beast's exposed throat. The creature's eyes widened, but it was too late. Rail drove the jagged stone deep into its neck, using every ounce of his strength to twist and force it in. The beast let out a final choked roar as its massive body staggered backward, blood pouring from the wound. It collapsed with a thunderous crash, and the arena fell silent for a heartbeat. Rail stood over the creature, breathing heavily. The crowd was stunned into silence. They had never seen a human fight like this, never seen such tenacity and skill. Rail's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't allow himself to relax. He wasn't done. Not yet. The Emperor's voice rang out from above, cold and commanding. Impressive. Ilorith said, his tone carrying a mix of disbelief and grudging respect. "But this is not over, human. You've only won your survival, not your victory." Rael's eyes didn't leave the fallen creature. He wiped his hands on his pants, feeling the weight of the Emperor's gaze on him. This was just the beginning. He had come to prove humanity's worth, and no matter how hard the Sci-Fi tried to break him, Rael would stand firm. The crowd's murmur slowly grew, a mixture of awe and fear. Rael's name was beginning to spread through the Empire. Humanity's name. And that was just the spark he needed to ignite the fire of rebellion. Rael stood in the aftermath of the battle, the arena now littered with the remains of the creature he had slain. His breath came in short, controlled bursts, his body sore from the intense battle. But despite the pain, despite the exhaustion, he stood tall. The arena, once filled with jeering spectators, was now silent in awe. They had watched as a human, someone they had once dismissed as insignificant, had not only survived but thrived in the face of their greatest challenges. For a brief moment, Rael allowed himself to look up toward the stands. The Sci-Fi nobles, once so sure of their superiority, now seemed hesitant, their expressions a mix of disbelief and respect. The Emperor's eyes, glowing with an otherworldly light, remained fixed on him from above. Rael could feel the weight of Ilorith's gaze, a presence that sought to dominate and control, but he wasn't afraid. The Emperor could not break him. Not now. Before he could fully process the magnitude of what he'd just accomplished, a cold voice echoed through the arena. "Enough of this," Emperor Ilorith declared, his words sharp and final. "The human has shown his worth as a fighter. But this arena is not about strength alone. It is about submission. The human will face one final test." Rael's jaw clenched. He had expected something like this. The Emperor was not one to let anyone walk away unchallenged. Not after Rael had made a fool of his beasts, not after he'd defied the Sci-Fi in front of the galaxy. Ilorith would not let him go easily. From the far gates, a new creature was released. Unlike the previous beasts, this one was not a mindless monster. It was a sentient being, humanoid in shape, but its features were distorted and unnatural. Its skin was slick and shiny, like blackened metal, and its eyes glowed with a strange violet hue. The creature's hands were adorned with sharp, blade-like claws, and its posture exuded a deadly, calculated intelligence. Rael didn't hesitate. His senses were already on high alert, his body instinctively preparing for the worst. This wasn't just a physical fight. The creature in front of him was no mere beast. It was something more, something created for the sole purpose of breaking him. The Emperor knew this. He knew that if Rael could defeat this creature, his victory would send a message that could not be ignored. The creature charged without warning, its claws slashing the air in a deadly arc. Rael ducked just in time, the blade slicing the air where his head had been moments before. His heart raced, his mind working in overdrive as he considered his next move. This wasn't a fight he could win by strength alone. He had to outthink it, outmaneuver it. The creature lunged again, and this time, Rael didn't dodge. Instead, he grabbed the creature's wrist mid-swing, using its own momentum to redirect its strike. The force of the move sent both of them tumbling to the ground. Rael rolled away quickly, his breath coming faster now, his muscles screaming in protest. He needed to end this quickly. The creature rose with unnatural speed, its eyes narrowing as it assessed him. This was no ordinary opponent. It was faster, smarter, and stronger than anything Rael had faced before. He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of the Emperor's judgment hanging over him like a guillotine. But he refused to give in. Rael's gaze flickered around the arena, searching for anything that could give him the upper hand. He spotted a cluster of jagged rocks scattered near the edge of the arena floor. Without thinking, he dashed toward them, the creature hot on his heels. As Rael reached the rocks, he spun around, using the terrain to his advantage. He jumped onto one of the larger stones, springing off it with the momentum to slam into the creature's chest. With a loud crack, he drove the creature back, using the brief moment of surprise to strike. He aimed for the creature's throat, using his knee to push it down and bring his fists to bear. The creature let out a strangled hiss as Rael landed blow after blow, each one harder than the last. He wasn't fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for humanity's future. The Empire needed to understand. Humanity would not bow. Not now. Not ever. Finally, with one final punch, Rael brought the creature to its knees, its violet eyes flickering with the last remnants of its defiance before it crumpled to the ground, lifeless. The arena fell into stunned silence. The crowd was too shocked to speak, too stunned to do anything but stare in disbelief. The creature was down, defeated. Rael had done it. From above, Emperor Ilorath's voice rang out, colder than ever. Impressive. But this is not over. The true test is yet to come. The arena was deafeningly quiet, as if the very fabric of the galaxy was holding its breath. Rael stood over the fallen creature, his chest heaving with exertion, his body slick with sweat. His hands were bloodied, his clothes torn, but he had done it. He had defeated the creature that was supposed to be the final test. For a fleeting moment, Rael allowed himself a brief feeling of triumph. He had proven something to himself, to the Scythar, to the galaxy. But that fleeting moment was short-lived. He wasn't done yet. Above him, the Emperor's voice boomed, cold and unforgiving. Impressive, human. You have done what no one thought possible. But now you will face the true challenge, the one that will decide your fate, and the fate of your species. Rael's eyes narrowed as he slowly stood, wiping the blood from his hands onto his already stained shirt. He had expected this. Ilorath wasn't the type to back down, not after his own pride had been shattered in front of the entire galaxy. The Emperor would not let him go easily. But Rael wasn't here to appease Ilorath. He was here to prove something much larger, to show that Scythar, that humanity could no longer be ignored, that they had power, resolve, and the will to survive against all odds. The ground beneath Rael's feet rumbled, and the arena gates creaked open once again. From the shadows, a new figure emerged. This one wasn't a beast, nor a monster, nor even a creature of the Scythar's design. It was something far more dangerous. A figure draped in black armor, its face hidden behind a helmet that glowed faintly with the same eerie violet light as the previous creatures. Rael's heart skipped a beat as the figure took its first step into the arena. It was humanoid, but there was something different about it. Its movements were precise, calculated, like that of a predator stalking its prey. There was an aura of deadly intent radiating from it, and Rael could feel the pressure of its presence, a weight that settled in the pit of his stomach. This, Ilorath's voice echoed through the arena, is your true test. This is the Karza, an elite warrior created for one purpose, to destroy those who threaten the Empire. You will fight it, and you will either defeat it or die. Rael stood motionless, sizing up the Karza. It was taller than him, its body built like a machine, its limbs honed for combat. Its black armor reflected the arena lights, making it appear as if it were one with the shadows. Every movement it made was fluid, like it was part of the very fabric of the arena itself. The creature did not need to speak. Its presence alone was enough to send a message. Rael's pulse quickened. He had faced beasts. He had faced odds that seemed impossible. But this was different. The Karza wasn't just an enemy to defeat. It was a challenge that was built to break him, to show the galaxy that humans were not worthy to stand against the Scythar. But Rael had something the Karza didn't have: the human spirit, the will to fight, to never give up, no matter the odds. He exhaled, clearing his mind. He had fought for Earth, fought for every life that depended on his success. The Karza was just another test, another obstacle. He had overcome worse. He would overcome this too. With a burst at speed, the Karza lunged forward, its claws raised high, a weapon designed to tear through flesh with ease. Rail dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the slash that would have cleaved him in half. His body hit the ground hard, but he was already rolling, coming up to his feet in one fluid motion. The Karza was faster than anything Rail had faced before, its movements so precise they were almost predictable. But Rail was not about to let it dictate the pace of the battle. He had to be smarter, quicker. He couldn't match the Karza's power head-on, but he could outmaneuver it. As the Karza struck again, Rail ducked and twisted to the side, using its momentum against it. He grabbed the creature's arm, spinning it around and throwing it off balance. But the Karza recovered instantly, its eyes locking onto Rail's with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. This was a fight to the death, and only one of them would walk away. Rail stood over the Karza, his chest heaving, his fists still clenched in the aftermath of the fight. The crowd was silent, almost unnaturally so, as they processed the impossible. A human. This human had just defeated their greatest warrior. The once proud Karza lay motionless, its violet eyes dimming, its chest heaving no more. Rail's gaze never wavered from the fallen creature. He was still ready to fight, still poised for the next challenge. His body screamed for rest, his limbs sore, but he wouldn't give in. Not yet. He had come this far, and there was no way he would let it all slip away now. He had to win. He had to show them all that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. The Emperor's voice rang out from above, harsh and commanding. Impressive, human. You have exceeded my expectations, but this will not be the end of your trials. Rail's jaw clenched, the words cutting through the tension in the air. The Emperor was right. This wasn't over. Rail could feel it in the atmosphere. The pressure was rising. The stakes were higher than they had ever been, and Iloreth wasn't about to let him walk away unchallenged. From the far side of the arena, the ground trembled. Massive mechanical doors began to rise, and a low, ominous hum filled the air. The crowd seemed to hold its breath as something enormous moved into view. A new opponent. Rail narrowed his eyes, instinctively assessing the new threat. What emerged from the shadows was not a beast like the others. It was a machine, towering above the arena floor, its silhouette casting a dark shadow over everything. Its body was made of sleek, blackened metal, its arms ending in massive cannons, and its glowing red eyes locked onto Rail with terrifying precision. The arena's energy seemed to shift. The crowd's anticipation was palpable, a sense of dread mixed with exhilaration. This was no longer just about a fight. It was about survival. Rail knew this was no simple challenge. The Karza had been a warrior, a beast of war, but this was a weapon. The Emperor was sending his most dangerous creation, his last trump card, to deal with the human. Rail took a deep breath, pushing through the fatigue that weighed on him. He was ready. He had faced impossible odds before, and now he would do it again. The mechanical behemoth didn't hesitate. It charged, its massive feet crushing the ground beneath it as it stomped toward Rail with devastating speed. Rail's mind raced. He couldn't match the brute force of this machine. He didn't have the strength, and he definitely didn't have the firepower. But he did have something the machine didn't: speed, agility, and the ability to think outside the box. As the massive machine raised its cannon, preparing to fire, Rail moved. He darted to the side, using the momentum of the machine's attack against it. The blast of energy from the cannon shot past him, narrowly missing his side, and Rail used the distraction to launch himself at the creature's exposed flank. He slammed into the machine's side, his fist striking with everything he had left. The blow barely made a dent, but it did something. The machine's movement faltered for just a fraction of a second. That was enough. Rail dodged and weaved, staying close to the machine's legs, avoiding its massive strikes as it swiped at him with one of its arms. He could see the intricate mechanics of the machine's design now, the weak points, the places where its power systems were vulnerable. Rail's eyes scanned the area, searching for anything that could give him an edge. His hand brushed against the arena's walls, and his fingers found something, a jagged piece of metal, sharp and sturdy. A weapon. He grabbed it without thinking, spinning it in his hand, feeling its weight. The machine roared as it turned, locking onto Rail again. But Rail didn't wait. He launched himself forward, using the broken piece of metal like a spear, aiming directly for the exposed power core at the base of the machine's chest. The machine's red eyes flared as Rail's makeshift weapon struck with a deafening crack, embedding itself deep within the armor. The machine staggered, sparks flying from its side, and Rail didn't stop. He twisted the metal further, his body screaming for release, but he didn't let up. The machine faltered, its movements slowing, and with one final forceful twist, the machine let out a screeching noise, then fell, its massive frame crashing to the ground in an explosion of sparks and smoke. Rail stood over it, panting, his heart pounding in his chest. The arena was silent again, the crowd unsure of how to react. He had done it. He had defeated the Emperor's final weapon. But as Rail stood there, the Emperor's voice cut through the quiet. "You may have won today, human, but this is far from over. You will never leave this arena alive." The roar of the arena was deafening. For a moment, Rail could hardly process the wave of noise, the surge of disbelief and awe washing over him from all sides. The Karza lay motionless at his feet, its once glowing eyes now dark and lifeless. Rail stood over the creature, his fists still clenched, his body trembling with the aftermath of the battle. Every muscle in his body ached, his chest burned, but the adrenaline was still coursing through him, keeping him upright. He had done it. For the first time since the Emperor's challenge began, Rail dared to look up, his gaze meeting that of Loreth. The HFY Emperor sat motionless on his golden throne, his expression unreadable. But his eyes glowed with something different now. There was no smug superiority, no arrogance, only the barest flicker of something Rail hadn't expected. Respect, or perhaps fear. "Enough," Loreth said, his voice cutting through the noise of the crowd. "The human has proven himself. But this is only the beginning." The Emperor's words hung in the air like a warning. Rail didn't flinch. He had proven his point, but he wasn't about to bow to the Emperor's commands. This was his moment, and he would take it. The HFY might have the power of their empire, but humanity had something they couldn't replicate, the will to fight, to survive, and to never, ever give up. Loreth slowly stood, his gaze never leaving Rail. "You are an anomaly, human," he said, his voice a low growl. "But even anomalies must be contained. The fate of your species, your entire galaxy, rests in the hands of the Empire. And you will bow to it." Rail didn't respond. He didn't need to. His eyes remained locked on Loreth, the Emperor's words slipping past him like water off a stone. He wasn't here to beg for mercy. He wasn't here to grovel or plead. He was here to show them that humanity was more than just a species to be crushed underfoot. They had the strength, the spirit, and the resolve to rise above it all. With a sudden motion, Loreth raised his hand, signaling for the arena guards to move in. Rail's heart skipped a beat. He knew what was coming. The Emperor wouldn't let this end in a peaceful resolution. But Rail wasn't done yet. He wasn't just going to leave. He wasn't going to let this battle, this victory, slip away. The guards moved toward him, their weapons raised, but Rail was already in motion. His body reacted instinctively, his muscles moving faster than thought. With a quick, fluid movement, he darted toward the nearest guard, disarming him with a swift blow before knocking him to the ground. Another guard lunged at him, but Rail was faster, sidestepping him, and using the guard's momentum to send him tumbling into the arena wall. For a moment, everything seemed to slow. Rail stood amidst the chaos, breathing heavily. But he didn't look back. His gaze was fixed on the Emperor. There was no fear in his eyes. There was only defiance. Loreth's eyes flashed with rage, but his voice was calm, almost mocking. "You may have won this battle, human, But you are still a pawn in a much larger game. The galaxy is ours to command, and your rebellion will be crushed like all the others. Rael's jaw tightened. We'll see about that. Before Iloreth could respond, the arena gates opened wide, and a figure stepped out from the shadows. A human. Rael blinked in surprise. The figure wore the tattered remnants of a spacesuit, but it was unmistakably human. It was a signal, a sign that humanity had not just survived. They were rising.